Welcome to Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here is the podcast host, James Delingpole.
Welcome to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest. He approached me out of the blue and offered to be on the podcast. And when I heard he was an ex-policeman, an ex-Rosa, ex-copper, I thought, result, because we haven't had one on the podcast before, and I'm really fascinated to discover why it is that the police have failed. So, welcome to the podcast,
Thank
Stephen
you
Place.
Thank you, James. Nice to meet you.
No, and you have another advantage as well. You come from the north.
I do.
You come from Bradford.
I do.
So I also want to ask you about how bad is the situation up there with the rape gangs? How bad is social cohesion? I mean, are we heading for civil war? So all sorts of things. But first of all,
Yes.
I'm sure there's going to be lots and lots of listeners to this podcast who look at the current state of the police in absolute despair. We've reached the point in Britain now, I think, where if your house gets burgled, you're probably not going to get it investigated.
No.
You might get a nice letter from the police saying, we are concerned, here is the nearest victim support group, and the police seem to spend far too much time investigating so-called internet hate crime,
Yes,
hurty
absolutely.
tweets.
Yes, yeah.
And then there's the rape gangs,
Yes.
which have been uninvestigated over a period of decades. I mean, finally we appear to be waking up. But this has been going on since, the 1990s? Maybe even the late 80s?
Yes, definitely.
So, first of all,
Okay.
tell me about your police career. How long were you in the police for?
I was in the police for 24 years altogether. I joined in 78 when I was a punk rocker.
Right.
And, the police were happy to have me. I joined actually in 78 as a boy cadet, so it was a little bit different to begin with. But at 78 I joined it. The police force was emerging in those times from Dixon of Duck Green days, where you had a local copper on the beat that would give the kids a clip round the ear and move them on and take them back to their parents. The parents would give them a clip round the ear in those good old days.
Oh.
And so I joined in 78, and if you remember, Margaret Thatcher came to power in 79.
Yeah.
But if I can fast forward a little bit to 82, when we had the summer riots. They kicked off in Bristol, St Paul's, and then they went up to Toxteth in Liverpool, and they emerged out in Chapeltown in Leeds. And I was a very young copper in 82, and we were put on the front line at Chapeltown, and it was like a scene out of a film, because the whole of Chapeltown Road was on fire. There were cars on fire, there were hundreds of people. And when I say we had to go around gardens stealing dustbin lids to use them as shields, that's exactly what we had to do, because we'd got nothing.
So you were getting, bricks, rocks chucked at you?
It was literally raining petrol bombs, bricks, and bits of the curb, car axles, cars on fire. It was very, very frightening. Especially, I was 22 or something like that.
And who was throwing this stuff?
It was the people in Chapeltown. It was mainly the sort of West Indian, Afro-Caribbean peoples that were disillusioned and fed up and thought they'd had a really bad time.
So they were kind of race riots?
There were race riots but based on sort of deprivation and no jobs and no hope,
Boarding,
etc.
probably. It was probably a good laugh for them for having a good ruck with the police.
Well, perhaps so at the time, yes. Yeah. It wasn't certainly for us, because I just saw policemen on fire being taken off to hospital. And things. Yeah. It was a regular thing, you know, in those riots. It was pretty horrendous. And but within a very, very short, because Margaret Thatcher came to power in 79. With Willie Whitelaw, who was then the Home Secretary.
Yeah.
And they were very tough on crime, you know. They were fabulous, and they looked after the police force. And we had all the equipment and the training, the shields and the riot gear. Within a matter of months, it was all put in place, and we were trained, and so we were ready for anything else that might happen. So, and if you remember the day in 1990, when Margaret Thatcher left Downing Street in tears, that day when she'd been sort of hoofed out by her party. Yeah. I for one, I'm of a very firm opinion that that's the day that law and order died in this country, because the successive governments have paid scant regard to law and order, the prisons, the police service, and if you fast forward to today now, the Tories, who have always claimed to be the party of law and order, they've just completely kicked the police into the long grass, and with the cuts cuts to manpower and everything else. There are police officers right now suffering with PTSD and mental breakdowns. We've had several police officers take their own lives. The numbers of resignations in London alone, I think, are something in the 2,000 and something this year. And the police force just can't cope.
I wish I'd done my research at this point.
Sorry, it's okay.
Because I wanted to ask you, you may not know the answer to this one. Has spending on the police decreased in real terms? Is the problem the government is not spending enough money and there have been cuts? Or is it that the way policing is done has been changed, so lots more money is spent on admin and bureaucracy and nonsense, and not enough on beat policing?
I think it's a combination of both. The main factor is the fact that you can't argue with the facts, and there's 21,800 and something police officers less now than there were in 2010, and we've got a rising crime rate which is just of unbelievable proportions in terms of violent crime, sexual crime. Violent crime would include robberies and things like that, the moped gangs and everything, and that's a real problem. And people are not stupid. People can see it on the TV. They see it on mainstream media, and they know what's going on. And we've walked from Birmingham New Street police station, train station here, and it's absolutely heaving out there, the streets of Birmingham.
We did not see a single copper.
Not a single copper. And there's the big Christmas market on, and there's just literally tens of thousands of people walking around Birmingham right now, and we've never seen a single bobby.
To be fair, none of the people we saw was breaking the law.
Oh no! But you can't leave the police to police themselves. The people to police themselves. You need that firm security and that feeling of I'm okay. There's people here, but you just never see a bobby on the beat. That's the big call, isn't it, for everybody? Yeah. People on streets and roads and avenues and cul-de-sacs of England, they never see a bobby.
So who made this decision to stop police foot patrols? Was that from within the police, or was that a government?
No. It was within government. I mean, that's the other thing. The police have become much more politicised. They've got these police crime commissioners now, who tend to be attached to a political party. West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire are Labour. Police crime commissioners. North Yorkshire, Julia is a Tory, and so they follow the party line basically, which I think is where we've gone wrong as well.
Right, because I remember noticing policing going wrong at about the time that, what's his name, Ian Blair, the Met Commissioner, who was exactly my idea of a wrong policeman. Yeah. Somebody who'd been fast tracked from university. He actually went to my college. He was actually educated at Christchurch, Oxford, but incredibly unsound. Incredibly. I mean, how he could relate to the rank and file Bobby, who has to kind of take the shit.
Well, James Cameron introduced direct entry at inspector and above level. So if you had a degree in zoology, you could just go straight into the police force as a police inspector.
I wouldn't mind zoology. It's sociology, I think, would worry me most.
Well, fine. I can understand that. But seriously, these people, when the police force is based on a 2-year probationary period, by which time you can be dismissed at any time, for whatever reason. And then once you've passed your 2-year probation, you are then allowed to apply for specialisms such as the CID or traffic, etc. But the majority of, obviously, police officers stop on the beat. But and then eventually you'll take your sergeant's exams and go through a sort of parole review, a promotion review, and promotion board, and hopefully get yourself promoted to sergeant, where you're expected to cut your teeth for 2 or 3 years as a sergeant at least before you become inspector. That's all changed. We've got direct entry now, and the police college, which is universally hated by the rank and file, they're now introducing the requirement just to join the police you must have attained a degree. I've never heard anything like it. We used to, they would get people to join the police from within the communities that they were going to serve and protect, and that's all changed.
They'll be doing this next to the army, won't they? They'll be saying that the squaddies have to have a degree, and
that's absolute madness.
I can't think of anything more guaranteed to
to fail.
Emasculate the police
Absolutely,
force.
absolutely. So you know, if you've been a copper on the beat for 2 years and you've done your probation, you've had a time in the CID, and you're looking for promotion, so you put the uniform back on and go back out on the streets, and you get the rank of sergeant, for instance, and then you say, right, well, I'm going to be a good sergeant, have a good shift of lads, and look after them, and get involved, and just be well regarded. And then suddenly somebody comes in who's never done a day's policing in their lives, and suddenly they are inspector boss and running the shift and in charge of you.
Surely they're required to spend a period on the beat, aren't they?
No.
They're not.
No. They go on a training course and then they come straight back out and they're on the beat as a
I bet they're taught
inspector.
things like kind of diversity awareness.
Well,
and
absolutely, of course they are.
Yeah.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
And touchy-feely hate crimes, what to look for. You know, they're not. But you know, you can't be a policeman unless you've had a proper good scrap on a Friday night in a curry house that's exploded, or you know, dealt with a domestic disturbance or car theft and counsel somebody who's had their house wrecked, you know, in a burglary. And you can't do it. You need to cut your teeth, get some wool on your back, as we used to say, and experience everything that the police force is going to throw at you, and that's where it's gone wrong.
So are you still in touch with serving police officers?
Yes, serving and ex-police as well.
And what's the mood within the? This is presumably up north. You're
Yeah, and you're talking about people that I'm on about the rank and file now. I'm not talking particularly about sort of senior officers, etc. But the rank and file, and I think the one word to describe it all is demoralised. Absolutely fed up to the back teeth. You know, they're having to work 12-hour shifts, and they're having to work long hours, long days before they get a rest day. Often, particularly in London, the rest days are cancelled. They're exhausted. The amount of assaults on police officers is just unbelievable to me. A few weeks ago, there were 40 in 1 week in West Yorkshire police officers assaulted on duty, and apparently the average number is 30 a week. So many of those then obviously have to have some time to recuperate and from their injuries, etc. So you're already losing more and more policemen.
Yes, funnily enough, on the way here, I was looking at my Twitter feed, and there was footage of a male copper and a female copper being assaulted,
getting beaten up.
Getting beaten up.
Yeah. And what annoys me more than anything else is, what about I can't say it, but what about the person that was filming it? Who are these people? We know the moral fabric of our society is completely broken down, and I've got 3 granddaughters, and it frightens me to death for their future. It really does.
Is there not a stiffer penalty for?
They've introduced a new Act of Parliament 2018. I think the first person that's been charged under that Act of Parliament was this weekend. But whether they bring the tariff in or not, I don't know.
So you should go down for longer.
You should go down for longer because there's a tariff applied because it's a member of the emergency services.
Well, I mean, obviously I'm not a member of the criminal classes. However, I think my generation, it's instilled in most of us. You don't physically attack police officers.
Exactly, or nurses, or ambulance drivers, or fire officers. You know, firemen. But it's a common occurrence because we've got the moral fabric of our society is completely and utterly broken down. There's no respect for the police. Some would say to you that the police don't earn respect. They don't deserve any respect. Well, why? We're policed by consent in this country. And I tell you what, woe betide any government that imposes, you know, the police force and law and order onto us, because that's when people will get really fed up. We police by consent. If the British people don't want a police force, say so. But other than that, you know, you must support and help these police officers, because we're not going to have a police force. I don't think we'll have a police force if it carries on the way it's going. We really won't.
I was thinking of another bit of footage I saw on social media fairly recently of policeman having his head kicked in a McDonald's or somewhere. Did you see that one?
I did.
It was quite extraordinary.
Yes.
And this stuff is doing the rounds. People are filming it and saying, go and get him. We need to return, don't we, to the sort of broken windows policy they had in New York? Because remember, New York was it was like Escape from New York in the 1970s. It was rubbish. And then they had this new no tolerance attitude towards
that's right,
bad
zero
behaviour.
Well, you can go 2 ways, I think. One is that you can actually put more coppers on the beat to start talking to the community and earning that respect back again, if you like, and becoming more involved. Or you can just go to a zero tolerance But then, that opens another big can of worms. Is if you start locking people up, where we're going to put them?
Yeah.
Because the prisons have failed completely.
Prisons are terrifying.
Failed.
They're just out of control, aren't they?
How those prison officers turn up each and every day and don the uniform and walk those landings and walk those halls and corridors of prisons with what's going on there, I think they're absolutely amazing people. Amazing people. I wouldn't do it. Not for a pension, I wouldn't do it,
All this, by the way, under a Prime Minister who, as Home Secretary, was reckoned to be one of the tougher, a Conservative Prime Minister, let's not forget,
yes,
one of the tougher Home Secretaries. So how is it that the Conservative Party, as you say, that the party of law and order, has become this husk?
I haven't a clue. It's their attitude. They've just kicked the police into the long grass. Theresa May went to the Police National Federation conference and told them to stop crying wolf and call them Jobsworths. And they were appalled at her behaviour. But on Sunday, I think it was Sunday, it was on LBC radio. She was interviewed and she denied saying that, but they've got video of her saying it, that the police force were crying wolf because of their massive drastic cuts. And here we are now, getting the brunt end of what's going on, and we're almost certainly in London, we're talking almost anarchy there with regards to being safe and the murders and what have you. There's many issues, isn't there?
How much of the problem lies within the kind of politically correct justice system, whereby, for example, you've got this, thanks to Tony Blair, you've got this hierarchy of crimes, so that if a sort of racial element is believed to be involved in an assault, then it's a hate crime.
Yeah.
And how much of that is to do with this, when you're filling out your arrest form and stuff, there's so much bureaucracy involved. It's easier not to arrest people.
Because the paperwork has just become absolutely incredibly stupid, hasn't it? There's so many forms to fill in, and then it goes off to another department, comes back to you. The Crown Prosecution Service have got to you have to wait for them to make a decision as to whether you can charge somebody or not now. Whereas it was one time, it was the inspector in charge of the cells, the Bridewell. He was the man or woman that decided on whether or not a charge could be accepted. So that's been taken out of the police hands. So it's all time constrained and it's all time consuming. Whereas, we just can't get on with the job.
I'm glad you mentioned the CPS, because you've reminded me of another awful thing about the police. And there's a point later on where I'm going to ask you, do the police bear any responsibility for this? Because I'm not altogether convinced by the case that the police are whiter than white and actually
absolutely not. No, of course.
But the CPS, under that dreadful woman, Alison Saunders, who must be the worst head of the CPS ever, who produced this effectively feminazi campaign against young men. She really wanted to boost the number of rape convictions for political reasons, and ended up creating a climate in which innocent young men who'd maybe had a few money to drink with equally drunk girls. And the girls have been persuaded that in this new culture, if you decide the morning after that you didn't like it after all, you can therefore squeal rape. And in many cases, there have been numerous examples of this. The police have actually been withholding evidence could have exonerated these young men
2 years earlier.
Now that
disgusting.
Those police should be behind bars.
Absolutely, because they're as bad as the people that they're alleging have committed the crimes. And I was dumbfounded to hear things like that. Absolutely dumbfounded. You think, what on earth is going on, where they're being told or actively encouraged, or there is an ethos within that department, whatever it is, that they're going to withhold evidence and have these young lads on bail for 2.5 more years. Their lives are ruined. All because, and then they've got evidence of girls where they've got text messages and all this kind of thing going on. But that's not to take away from the fact that I dealt with some rapes, some pretty horrific rapes, and they are horrendous. It's a horrendous crime. And I don't think the CPS in this instance have done anybody any good in any way, shape or form. Nobody's come out of this in a good way. Yeah,
because I would have thought you joined the police because on some level, you're interested in justice, aren't you?
Yes.
You want the bad guys put away.
And helping people.
And you want to help the innocent people.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get my head around the mentality. Is it because they get given these targets? You know, we've got to up our rape convictions. Therefore, doesn't matter if he's innocent. You know, doesn't matter if you've got exonerating evidence. Let's just keep it quiet, shall we? Get him through the courts, get it, and it'll look good on our records. Is that the kind of attitude?
I'm sure it's target led, and I'm sure that's got an influence on it as well. But it depends who's in charge of your department. Because if you're wanting to stay in the CID, for instance, or whatever, you've got to toe the line, haven't you? It's like any organisation, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And if there becomes an ethos within that department that's what they're going to do, then that's what will happen. It doesn't make it right. I'm not condoning it in any way at all. I'm trying to explain it. And yes, I agree with you. Those people that were in charge of that, they should be made to pay for what they did to those young men.
And they haven't been at all.
No, they haven't been at all, have they? It's the same case of Sir Cliff Richard. What happened to him was just absolutely, it's an abomination of what happened to him. They tipped off the South Yorkshire Police tipped off the BBC.
Yes.
They were flying above his house while they raided it and got nothing from it.
Yeah, because Cliff Richard was completely innocent.
Absolutely.
And
3 years that man's been, his life's been made a misery.
Yeah.
And, and they were just hoping on a big, massive fishing expedition that people would come out of the woodwork and lay claims to him. But of course, had somebody come out of the woodwork with a genuine complaint, there is a good way, you could think strongly that there's a good case to be made that another 3 or 4 would have come out hoping for a cash payout, and that's the type of thing that the society we're living in.
Yeah.
And I'm just so surprised about it.
Listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special ex-policeman guest, Stephen Place. More in a moment.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
I don't care if they call you sexist, racist, xenophobe. Just let them do it. Don't worry about them. You don't have to convert, don't have to convince. All you have to do is introduce the idea and trust people with it. You can trust that the conservatism is there. Progressives had to use it to sell their death ideology.
Sonny's Corner, Saturday at 1 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special ex-policeman guest, Stephen Place. Now, I'm giving you a slightly hard time, or rather, I'm pushing you on the issue of the police because, A, I'm interested in the truth and in justice, but B, it really interests me to know who exactly is to blame for this awful shit show of the law and order in Britain, which is just collapsing on every level. Yeah. So we know, for example, that the Crown Prosecution Service, under that awful, useless, thick, vengeful harpy, Alison Saunders, is definitely... And her predecessor, who was almost as bad, that awful man is now a Labour MP. What's his name?
Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer.
Sir Keir Starmer.
Sir Keir Starmer, who was... He was a chocolate fireguard of a CPS, head of CPS. Yeah. He also politicised the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, which is for American special friend listening, that's the organisation which decides whether or not to prosecute cases, doesn't it? So definitely the politicians are partly to blame, but also going back to those rape cases, all those young men whose lives have been pretty much destroyed by false accusations, then endorsed by the police and dragged through the courts. Who in local police authorities or departments would have been responsible for their sufferings? Is that a CID issue or a...
CID would deal with a rape, yeah. I mean, the uniform would probably deal with the initial... uniform officer would probably deal with an initial call out to a rape, and then it would get handed on to somebody within the CID. Well, that's how it used to be. It may have changed now because there aren't many CID officers. There's a dearth of them.
Okay.
Qualified, good, experienced CID detectives.
Okay, so Criminal Investigation Department.
They would normally deal with the rape case
Okay.
and take it through to the courts.
And that would be run by what's the rank of an officer in charge?
Well,
of
you have a group of detectives, then you have a sergeant who would be in charge of those, then you have a detective inspector who would be in charge of different. So you have a team of detectives and a sergeant. You'd maybe have 4 in each police station, and then hopefully, and then you would have an inspector who's in charge of all 4 teams, as it were, and then a DCI who would come in when you've got major cases like a murder or kidnapping or something like that, and then of course you've got the superintendent, chief superintendent above that.
Right.
But it's really within the local police station, as it were, that deals with everything. It's your DI, detective inspector, and your DCI, detective chief. It sets the theme of how you're going to operate.
They set the tone. So in the same way, when a regiment in the army has got a dodgy CO,
yes,
that dodginess, a fish rots from the head. Mm-hmm. So you've got the squatters behaving badly as well.
There's a massive disconnect now, though, between the senior officers and the rank and file. You know, the ordinary men and boys, I beg your pardon, and men and women that don the blue uniform day in, day out, 24/7. They're the ones that are on the sharp end of everything. And then you've got sort of inspector, chief inspector, superintendent above. They're mainly looking for their next rank, aren't they?
Yes.
They're looking for their next job. So anything that's dodgy that might affect their career, they're not going to get involved with. And then you've got the CPS and the prosecution services who will set the tone of what's to be prosecuted and what's not to be prosecuted.
So which are the ones that have been fast-tracked? If you get fast-tracked through university...
Inspector and above.
So the sergeants are basically people who've paid their dues. They've walked the beats.
Yes, they've walked the beat, got promoted to sergeant, and of course, being a sergeant is not the best rank in the world because you get the shit from below and you get the shit from above.
Yeah.
So they're in the middle, really, middle order management, you know. And obviously, getting out of sergeant rank to inspector level is what you would want to be doing. But of course, inspector level now we've got these direct entries. And people who come in and don't know anything about nothing.
And who was that? You said it was Cameron.
Cameron brought that in.
Oh, he's such a creep. He really is.
Well, he brought direct entry, and I think it caused a major stir. And in some police forces now, there's what they call positive discrimination. So
you get Ali Dizai, whatever.
Well,
his
if
name
you're
is.
female or from an ethnic minority, you're more likely to get promoted than a white male.
I mean, at the risk of being sexist. I mean, it's really a man's job, isn't it, being in the police?
Well, you would say that, wouldn't you? But to be honest with you, well, you would. Most people would. Most people would think, these little girls, because they are small, some of these police women. But to be honest with you, when I was pounding the beat, as it were, a lot of the policewomen I worked with were far better than the lads.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were as tough as boots, tough as old boots, but they'd also have a good chance of talking your way out of something and a calming effect on things. But they also kept us straight, they kept us on the straight and narrow and told us to behave. When we needed it, we had to be told to behave ourselves, So there were, we used to have 2 policewomen to every shift when I was in the police force. It's probably different now, but we respected the policewomen, we loved them, we thought a lot about them and they thought a lot, and we worked very well with them.
Okay, but you're on the beat in a rough... Well, not that you would be on the beat now because it doesn't exist pretty much.
No,
you're on the beat in a rough area. Come on, you'd want a 6-foot lad rather than...
preferable, yeah. But on many occasions, that the policewomen that truthfully, the policewomen that I work with, I'm not saying this, they were fabulous and could handle themselves pretty well.
Right.
They were pretty good.
That's interesting. It's good to have my rampant sexism.
No, honestly,
corrected.
I tell you, I mean, there were police men that I would choose not to work with, and there were police women that I would choose not to work with, but majority of them. But you'd be very, very happy to go out and get involved with, no problem at all.
And what percentage would you say of coppers are just bent? Corrupt?
Oh, I'm to clue. I don't. The rank and file work in the streets.
Yeah.
Not many at all.
Not many.
No. They're dedicated. They get on with the job, and as I say, they're the ones that are getting all the brunt of all this. They're the ones that are getting their knees dislocated and their jaws smashed and getting beaten up and
getting spat on.
Yeah.
And
the Met Police won't allow spit masks. The City of London, Westminster Police, they're allowed spit masks, but the Met Police are not allowed spit masks to deal with violent offenders. What's going on? The worst thing, it only happened to me twice, and you got to bear in mind these coppers are human beings. Somebody walks, in the middle of a fight with somebody, or you're going to arrest somebody, and they just gob in your face. I'm sorry, it's just not on.
And then you've got hepatitis.
Well, you could have anything,
yeah.
But it's just unpleasant, isn't it? It's a horrible thing, to have done to you. And how are you supposed to keep your temper and keep your forbearance and everything when you're coming up with something like that?
Yeah.
Some cretin gobbing in your face full on. No, thank you.
Now tell me, on the rare occasions these days when I do see policemen, like as not, they're attending some drunk who's incapacitated on the street. I see a lot of that.
Yeah.
How much police and ambulance service time
crackers,
gets wasted on
crazy
career alcoholics?
Absolutely crazy. Every Friday night, going to any big major city, and you'll get coppers locking people up that are drunk, been fighting, can't handle the drink, men and women, just the same, But the simple thing is, you've got to discourage them, haven't you? Why isn't it an automatic? You've been arrested for being in drink, and causing a breach of the Queen's peace, or you've assaulted somebody. The assault is, I suppose, dealt with in a different way. But what if you're taken to a hospital, for instance? Why is it not an automatic £350 fine?
Well, I
suppose hospitalisation.
Yeah.
And you've done that to yourself, haven't you? Nobody's done that to you. You've gone out and got yourself absolutely blathered, and where you can't stand up. You've lost all control of your sensibilities, and you're starting to lash out and hit people, or you literally can't stand up.
Yeah.
So why not like you say, you involve all the services, take them off the streets where a genuine person might be having a heart attack and they need an ambulance. They haven't got one because there's some idiot sparko on the floor because he's had too much of a belly full and a skin full of ale, and just automatic fine, and we'd stop it.
Do you still get a night in the cells, or is that over now? Does that not happen?
No. I think they get a night. If they're not hospitalised, they get a night in the cells.
Right. Oh well, at least some standards.
Well, yes, you hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, and my wife was saying to me the other day, I can't remember. That's right. We went to Rome the other day, and I was loving the fact that there are so many military everywhere. The Italian military are all over Rome, all the sites.
Yeah.
And for Italians, they're really looking good as soldiers.
Right.
They're holding, at least one of them is holding his rifle in the position where
he's ready to go.
Ready to go. Everywhere I looked, and I thought, I respect you, Italian army, and I respect you, Italian government, for before I flew there, I thought, God, I'm flying into the middle of a massive terrorist target. And when I got there, I felt safe as houses.
Yeah.
And so we got talking about London. I said, I wish we had more armed soldiers on the streets of London. Actually, I'd feel reassured. And my wife said to me, yes, my father always used to say that one of the things that made Britain special was the fact that our police aren't armed. And I was thinking, I remember we always used to say that, but actually we live in different times now. Tell me, do you think our police should be routinely armed or not?
Well, it's a romantic notion, isn't it, that we've got the bobby on the beat with the big top hat on, and they're just wandering around saying hello to everybody, and when they're needed, and when you need them, they're always there. And I would love and long for those days again. I really would. I'd love to go back to those
Dixon
days.
Dock Green.
Dixon Dock Green. Yeah. Where you've got a local copper. Everybody knows him. He goes drinking in the pub with everybody. He knows who in Bradford we used to call thieves Ganniffs. So he knows who the local Ganniffs are.
Yeah.
And all that kind of thing. But sadly times have moved on, haven't they? And it's an indictment on our society, isn't it? Where I genuinely feel. I don't know whether we need to. I mean, we have. I mean, airports, train stations, Leeds, German market. The market for Christmas. I'm sure out here in Birmingham, the big market, there'll be armed police walking around, and I think it's sad, but it's come and it's here and it's going to be staying, I'm afraid.
You said, can I disagree with one of your points?
Yep.
You said an indictment on society. I don't think it's remotely an indictment on society.
Right.
I think it's entirely an indictment on fundamentalist Islam.
There's that element to it.
It's not gangsters.
Yeah.
No. It's not old gangs.
No, fair enough. I mean, yes, yeah. I mean, there's a continuous threat, isn't there, that at any one point somebody can be turn up with a bomb, or somebody can turn up with a gun and a machete or knives and wreak bloody havoc on the streets of London, streets of England, anywhere.
Yeah.
And that is a frightening notion, without a doubt. So that's opening up another subject matter, isn't it? But yeah, it's there, you know. And I think that the people of Great Britain, I'm not bothered about the politicians, because to me they're all in a cesspit in Parliament. I think Parliament's a cesspit, and it wants clearing out. But you're looking at people, like you say, you know, walking the streets of Tewkesbury, walking the streets of Preston, Cambridge, Telford, you know, Tetbury, wherever you are in the country. There is a potential danger now that something's going to happen, and particularly now at Christmas time, because it's our festival, isn't it?
Well, we're all out
the
on the
fundamentalists
streets.
don't agree with Christianity and Christmas, so therefore, you know, I would imagine, this is just my opinion, I have no evidence for this, but I would imagine that the potential is heightened right now, leading up to Christmas time, and it's a frightening notion, James, you know, and it's just sad to see that we have to have armed police officers patrolling Christmas markets when people are buying presents for their families. Yeah,
so you see the armed police, and they look pretty tasty. They can handle their guns. Now, the counter-argument I hear about why we shouldn't routinely arm our police is that you need the extra training, that not all police are kind of up to the job of carrying firearms.
Probably right.
And the other problem, which we've seen on the continent, where you have women, I'm sorry, going back to my sexist point, but I think this is borne out by evidence. There have been quite a few incidents where Islamic terrorists have used their superior strength to grab the female police officer's handgun and shoot them with it. Now, that's a problem, isn't it?
Well, it is, but it always will be. I mean, you can't. They'll probably get, if they're big enough, strong enough, they'll get a male copper down on the street, on the floor as well, and get his gun. You know, so I don't really think there's a lot of difference to be had there. You know, if you're going to arm them, let's arm them. It depends on your take on it. You know, for me personally, if I can be blunt, I think we've got to stop pissing about in this country, and we've got to accept that what we've got, and I think we need to deal with it, and we need to take a stance, and I think we need to take some proper firm affirmative action to counter the continual threat.
I think. Well, everyone, we're pushing it an open door with this podcast. Everyone listening to this podcast is going to agree with you, but I think a lot of them would say, I'd certainly say, okay, we'll arm you, and we'll give you all the kind of, you know, whatever Judge Dredd equipment you want, and whatever powers you need.
Right.
But in return, you've got to stop arresting young men for imaginary rapes. You've got to stop pushing your weight around for people doing hurty tweets. Yeah. You've got to stop your political correctness. You see, I worry that the police is now so institutionally PC,
it is
politically correct.
That's a big
that
problem.
You don't deserve our sympathy.
No, I agree with you. I mean, when you see nearly, I think there's about 80 to 100 police officers all marching out of Liverpool Central Police Station, all in uniform, with whistles and banners and wavy things, all dancing to go on a Pride March.
On the Pride March, yes!
We've completely lost the plot, and as far as I'm concerned, the police force they're putting themselves forward for absolute total ridicule.
Yes.
And the office of constable is so denigrated and ruined that you know, things have got to change, and until that mindset within the seniority of the police is changed, we're going down this pathway of complete and utter anarchy. We really are, you know, and I'm not trying to be a draconian or you know, martial law or anything like that.
You sound way too reasonable to me, Steve.
But we need to make a decision in this country, and you know, I'm 57 years of age, and all I've ever known all my life is a Labour or a Tory government. Okay, and look at the state of us. Look at the state of where we are. I'm not just talking Brexit. I'm not talking about rape gangs. I'm talking about the whole fabric of our society. Look at where we are. And I've got 57 years to attest to that. It doesn't, you know, varying degrees and varying, you know, Blairing for 13 years, and then before that you had Thatcher, and before that you had the Labour government of the 70s, where we had, strikes and power cuts, and these youngsters nowadays, they haven't got a clue what went on, have they? You couldn't bury people. They were stacked high. There was rubbish all up down the streets with rats everywhere. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And I can remember all the lights went off at 7:00. And you had to sit the candles.
That's a Labour government.
That's a Labour government,
yeah.
And then you've got the Tory government now, where the cuts and everything else. And I think we're in a mess. So it's time for a change. And I just wish the country would be bold. I wish they'd be empowered.
You're UKIP.
I am UKIP.
Now,
sensible, common sense attitude to draining the swamp of Westminster, because they are a corrupt cesspool of people. They haven't got a clue what's going out on the. I invite them all the time to come up and spend a day with me in Bradford, and come round with me and see what people are dealing with and what they're having to live with. Come up, but none of them do. None of them will.
Now, I'm going to pick you up on something,
Okay.
which is part of me wants to believe that every rank and file police officer is doing his or her duty, and they're motivated. They just want to put bad guys away and protect the public.
Well, it's not always like that, James,
No.
because you get lazy bastards, and you get people that will turn the other cheek because they can't be interested. And you'll get people, if they turn up to a big fight on a Friday night somewhere, you get the cowards that go around picking policemen's helmets up, while the other coppers are getting stuck in.
Do they?
You've always got that.
Yeah. Okay.
We're a body of people, you're always going to have that.
I'm not arguing with that. I'm not arguing with human frailty. What I'm arguing with are the kind of, you mentioned these people going on gay pride marches. I think there was some kind of thing where, was it Bristol Police, where they wore stilettos for a day so that they can experience what it's like being
Have you ever heard
transgender?
anything like it in all your life? We've lost the plot.
No. So what I'm asking is, are they doing it because to suck up to their politically correct superiors who are imposing this crap on them, or do they on some level buy into this nonsense?
Well, I'm sure one or two of them do. I'm sure some of them they must do, because I tell you what, when I was a serving police officer, did
you ever wear high heels?
If my sergeant or my inspector had come to me and said, "Right, we're wearing high heels today, just to see how it feels," he'd have been told to get on his bike double quick.
Yeah.
I haven't got time to start messing about wearing high heels. I've got 3 burglaries to go to.
Yes.
And somebody just nicked a car from Woolworths car park, and that's where we'd have been. But I think I feel physically sick when I see police officers doing that. We are the police force. We're police by consent, wearing high heels, waving floaty things and stickers and whistling and dancing down the street. I'm sorry, nah.
Although you make a good point. If you were dealing with 4 burglaries a day, and if
that's dealing with a lot more than that.
If they're wearing high, how many burglaries can you get to in high heels?
That's
Probably
just an
really not many.
It's just a joke, James. And anybody listening to this, any decent member, sensible member of the public, including a lot of my, I have a lot of friends that are gay, and they'd be appalled too. It's just ridiculous.
And I'm sure that our American special friend is thinking, "Oh my God, is this what has become of England?"
Yeah,
Britain,
who was
which
the
used to be-
guy? It wasn't for Manchester. It wasn't, because the B was the sign after the Manchester bomb, wasn't it? It was like the symbol that they put. But there was some copper somewhere dressed as a bumblebee for the day, running around the streets. And you just think, to me, mate, you just hand your uniform in because you just want sacking.
Yeah, and become a
and
bee
it's the same with the fella.
instead.
Let's get really controversial. The guy who was the senior police officer in the Met that sat in his car and locked it while PC Palmer was stabbed to death. I've no words, James.
Just tell me the view, because
every rank and file copper would have been sick to their stomach to have heard that story. And not only that, when it was quite clear that the guy had been shot dead, did he get out and help? No, he drove off. He bloody drove away. He's been allowed to retire on full pension, and the man was an absolute abject coward.
Yeah. You're talking about, just in case listeners have forgotten, this is Khalid Masood, the Westminster Bridge.
Who stabbed PC Keith Palmer to death.
Yeah.
Who was unarmed.
And the senior police officer was in a car a few yards away, driving past.
Craig McKay, he'd come out from a meeting in Parliament, sat in a car with 2 other people. It's never been established who the 2 other people were. And he locked the door.
Oh, there were 3 of them in the car?
There were 3 of them in there. He locked the bloody door of the car and sat there whilst Keith Palmer was stabbed to death. Yeah. And I mean, I've never heard, I felt physically sick to hear that. But not only that, as I say, once it was quite clear that Masood had been shot dead, did he get out and why, what's going on? No, he buggered off in his car. And then Cressida Dick came out and said, and a lot of other senior police officers came out and said, it's protocol. That's exactly what he would have done. The driver would have shut and locked the door. Well, if the driver was a copper, he's a disgusting coward as well. You just do not do that. And I know I'm a bit old school and I'm a bit old in the tooth, but at the end of the day, long in the tooth, at the end of the day, no chance. You just do not that. That sums up to me the state of the British police force.
Yeah,
absolutely and totally. And I'm every copper I've ever spoken to since about that would say the same as me. They were absolutely disgusted.
Right. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Stephen Place. More in a moment.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlowe.
Censorship is a key issue here, particularly for people on the right. Do you think it was addressed adequately?
Definitely not. It was useful to name check Diamond and Silk. It was useful to check even politicians who had campaign ads that were shut down. But in every case, Zuckerberg was allowed to essentially dismiss the case and move on.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Stephen Place. Before I ask you, I want to cheer us all up because
it's been a bit doom and gloom,
it
has.
Later on, I'm going to ask you about Bradford, which sounds like a question leading towards further misery, but actually, I think you're going to say some encouraging things.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you: have you ever seen Life on Mars?
Yes, bits of it. Yes, I have. Yeah.
So, it went to America as well, I think, didn't it?
I think so. Yes.
So, Life on Mars is where a copper from the present goes back to the 1970s.
Gets knocked out and wakes up in the 70s or something.
And he sees old school policing
Yeah.
Do you? Would you like to go back to those days?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. They said to me at one point, "Would you like to go on the shoplifting squad in Bradford?" Yeah. And I was like, "You know what? The shoplifting squad." And I had this vision of like locking old grannies up for nicking a peach out of Morrison's, supermarket. And oh my goodness me, it was like Starsky and Hutch. We never stopped. And we just never stopped. It was an amazing time. You had prisoners everywhere chasing around after people with teams from Liverpool and Manchester coming into the Bradford interchange, which is a big bus rail station, taking over a bank of lockers. And then the girls would go out with their coats and their big bags and nick to order and then fill up the locker. Once the lockers were filled, they all got on the trains and beggared off again, And I can remember going with big like transit vans, police vans with uniform, and we were in plain clothes, going to parts of Manchester and Liverpool and raiding houses, and just the stuff we recovered was just unbelievable. And they were bang at it, as we used to call it. And it was an amazing time, and we had a detective who was just sadly passed away. He ran it, Dave Gash, and he was just amazing. And what a fabulous time that was. And I was really sort of like a bit mealy-mouthed about going into that department, but I absolutely loved it.
I've suddenly remembered. What was your police department? What do we call them in this country? I've forgotten. Like South Yorkshire Police and what?
West Yorkshire.
Yeah,
West Yorkshire Police, Bradford. Yeah.
So you're Ripper country.
Yorkshire Ripper, yeah. Well, I joined in 78 and he'd been going since 75, so the whole county was in lockdown, particularly Bradford, Leeds, Huddersfield. We were on lockdown. On a night time, we played taxi to girls going home after nightclubs. And
Did you?
Oh, yeah, and the taxi drivers. To be fair, the taxi drivers in Bradford, I think it was the same in Leeds, they would, if there were two girls on the route making their way home late at night, they would run them home free. There was a big thing about it. And I mean,
how long did that go on for?
I'm just trying to think when he was he arrested in 80? I think it was 80. I can't remember, 80 I think. But he murdered 13 and attacked 7. So he was prolific.
Right.
He was. But do you know what, James? He was the luckiest bastard ever. Because when Josephine Whittaker was killed in the park at Halifax, Savile Park, not 20 minutes before that, a policeman had been exercising his police dog there. And when he'd killed Barbara Leach in Backash Grove in Bradford, literally not even a mile from the Bradford City Police Station, student land, there was a policeman who had been sat in a tree. And we used to do that a lot, believe it or not. We used to get in trees and get up on fire escapes because you could see over the roofs, and burglars and things.
Yeah.
And he'd been sat in a tree, literally, and they'd called him in to take over a car relief while the car driver had his break. So he climbed down the tree and walked away, and literally under that tree in the dustbin was where he put Barbara Leach.
No. So had he not been called away,
it'd have been
he
in
would
the
have watched
tree.
the Yorkshire Ripper putting the body in the
yeah.
That. Okay.
And had he been 20 minutes earlier in Halifax, the policeman with his police dog would have caught him killing Josephine Whittaker.
Now, the question I've got to ask you.
Yeah.
The rape gangs.
Yeah.
Now, presumably you had these rape gangs operating in your jurisdiction.
Yeah, there's just been, in Huddersfield, they've just dealt with 20, and there's another 20.
That's West Yorkshire, is it?
That's West Yorkshire.
Okay.
There's another 20, well, Huddersfield's right next to Bradford.
Okay.
Just dealt with 20, and there's another 29 just been charged, and their trials won't be till the latter end of this year and then early and late and middle of next year. But the problem is they give a lot of them bail, and so of course they just abscond and go back to Pakistan.
Yeah. So my question to you is, what the hell were the police doing, letting this stuff go on?
Well, it wasn't just the police.
No, I know.
But they've got a big part in it, without a doubt. Well, I'll tell you why, because they're just PC, aren't they? Frightened to death of upsetting those communities from which the perpetrators are derived from. Simple as that. There's no other way to put it. They were just absolutely frightened to death of upsetting, of being called racist and dealt the race card. But the evidence is so big and so strong now. But you see, the lefty do-gooders, the snowflakes, they come straight back at you and say, well, there's a lot of white people committing paedophilia. Yes, of course there is, but not in large-scale industrial gangs like this. Yeah. And there's more evidence now emerging that it's not just they're raping them and they're buggering them. And they're taking them and they're trafficking them, and they're making a living out of selling girls to other men in other cities.
Yes.
Let's not sugarcoat it. Okay, but there's also emerging evidence now of torture, and so the whole thing is absolutely sick, and but nobody is prepared to put their head above the parapet and take it on full weight. Well, watch out, because UKIP are.
So, just going back.
Yeah.
How much of it is just not very clever policemen having gone through this diversity awareness training and not really realising that a crime is being committed?
Well, no, they knew a crime had been committed.
They do.
Yeah, but
they're aware of it.
They basically didn't care, James, because you're talking about vulnerable kids from rough backgrounds, who are in care or who've got broken families or whatever, the background is. That's where they come from, these young girls. And the police force treat them like everybody else treat them.
So do the police officers, the rank and file policemen, do they come from the same backgrounds that these girls come from?
Many do. Yeah,
so they have this kind of
empathy with them, or they've got this sort of understanding of what they're going on, what they're going through.
But it sounds like that they haven't, because they weren't arresting the perpetrators.
No, they weren't arresting the perpetrators. They were just ignoring them, telling them to go away. And then there were Jackie Smith, who was the Labour Home Secretary. I've just put a Freedom of Information request into the Home Office about this, but there is evidence that she sent out an order to all the police forces to ignore it.
Right,
and
then
on the basis that these girls were making life choices. Some of them are 10 years old, Jim.
Yeah, well, that's
11-year-old, 10-year-old girls. One girl had 8 abortions by the time she was 15. Now, why has nobody's picked that up? I find it incredible. Okay. Absolutely unbelievable.
So, okay, we accept that it wasn't just the police. It was they
had a large part in it.
The local authorities, the childcare specialists. They should have done something. Everyone's culpable to a degree.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that, as you say, the police bear a good deal of responsibility. So, at what level do you think that the finger of blame should be pointed? Should it be pointed at the rank and file, or is it these parachuted in, fast tracked?
No. I think it's down the rank and file.
Is it?
I think it's down the rank and file. Yeah.
So they kind of despise these girls.
No, I wouldn't say despise. I just don't think they came high up on their order of importance. It's as simple as that. And you get these girls coming in saying, this guy's, doing this, that and the other to me and this, that and the other to me, and they'd be like, well, what do you want me to do if you're allowing them to do it and you're going with them, and then it's only because things have changed now. Let's let's underline it. Things have changed massively now. They're taking enormous more interest in what's going on, and they've got particular squads, as it were, dedicated safeguarding teams towards this. But there's still a lot of things going on. I mean, they're still at it, they're doing it. They'll be doing it right now today. But they're not using curry houses and kebab houses to entice them now. There's a lot of evidence emerging that they're literally turning up at the school gates and driving them away. But the girls are frightened to death, you see, because they're told that if it isn't them, it's going to be their sister or their mother, or and they're frightened to bloody death, and that's a problem.
But we've always had, like most countries, we've got statutory rape laws. We've got there was an age of consent.
Yeah, 16.
16. So, if you've got a 13-year-old girl who's having sex with a man a middle-aged man, how could the police rationalise to themselves that this was consensual?
Well,
or legal even?
I haven't a clue. And it's shocking, and that's what they were doing, but they were, and they've been looking the other way, and a lot of it is because of the communities that they're trying to police.
Right. Now, we've got 10 more minutes, and you said to me something that I found rather shocking on the way here. You told me that in Bradford, things aren't as bad as because I just thought, you live in Bradford, I thought that this is the beginning of the civil war which is going to take over the country. That you've got these Muslim communities which will not integrate in the slightest, and you've got kind of the old white working class being driven out of the city centres, but you say it's really not bad.
Not my experience in Bradford, no, don't get me wrong, things aren't absolutely all cosy and lovely in the Rose Garden, but in terms of like feeling threatened or filling up, no-go areas, I haven't experienced
that. Not?
No, I don't get that. You can go more or less anywhere you want in Bradford. I park up, me and my two sons, for our sins, are Bradford City supporters, and we've got season tickets. Bradford City are doing terrible at the moment. But where Bradford City Football Club is, it's right in the centre of like Manningham, the area where a lot of Asians, predominantly Asian, live there. But I'm quite happy to park up on an evening game. I feel safe, I feel secure, there's no problems. Driving in and out of Bradford is absolutely no problem. One thing it's got worse, is that often just the driving around Bradford, it's like being on the Dodgems in a fairground, because there's no coppers there to police it, and the driving is appalling.
So it's like sort of Karachi moves to...
Well, it's a bit, it's just, they'll cut you up, undercut you, and it's not just Asians, but, everybody just drives like lunatics, and I don't like that wants stamping out. But I personally don't, feel that, to be honest with you, that Bradford is a bad city at all. I would welcome anybody to come and visit. The old St George's Hall where I grew up with my music, we saw all the live bands and everything. That's just had millions spent on it, redoing it up, and it's a beautiful venue, and hopefully that will be open soon and get the live bands there back again. It's quite a vibrant city, there's a lot of things going on.
Don't use that word vibrant.
Sorry.
It's just a kind of, it's a politically correct euphemism.
But there's a lot. Honestly, if it wasn't, I'd say so. As you know, I mean, Birmingham here, where we're sat at the moment, it's got a lot more problems than Bradford has.
That's interesting.
It's a lot more problems in Birmingham, and I think Blackburn and Bolton and places like that. Bradford's had its problems. We've had riots and all sorts of things going on, but for the moment, my view of Bradford is that it's quite serene.
Ah, okay. So if you acknowledge that there are many towns in the north which are badly off, what's Bradford? Say Bradford? Why is it okay?
I just think the people from Bradford are just people from Bradford. We're very laid back, we're very honest and open with everybody. We won't suffer fools gladly, and they're just lovely people. They're very welcoming, and I just think, of course, there'll be one or two people within the population of Bradford that are sort of, I wouldn't say racist, but certainly, they've got the eye on the ball in terms of what's going on, and if anything, it's happening, and that. I think the council, this is my personal view, the Bradford Council, which is Labour dominated, have got a lot of questions to answer. A lot of questions.
Well, I think you said that about pretty much every Labour council.
Well, I suppose so. Yes, but there's a lot of things going on there that would worry me, going forward as well. But it's down to the people of Bradford, isn't it? They've got to make a choice and vote something different.
But the northern towns are all traditionally Labour, and probably always they'll vote monkey in with a.
Oh yeah. You could stick a red rosette on a goat and it would get elected.
Exactly.
And I understand that, but until that changes, things will be as they are. But the biggest problem for me, if you think, is that nobody from Westminster comes up north. Nobody comes and visits us and talks to us and sees us. You get your Labour, the MPs that live up here, but actually, they talked about this northern powerhouse and everything.
No,
what's going on? Where's that money gone? Who's it's rubbish.
How did Bradford? Was it a mill town?
Yeah, a big mill town.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was its rise to prosperity and everything.
Absolutely.
Yes, when was peak Bradford?
I would have said sort of from 1850 to about 19 till the First World War. I would have thought.
So have you got nice civic architecture still?
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, the Cartwright Museum, the Bradford Town Hall itself is fabulous. There's lots of they built lots and lots of what I call big Victorian villas for people to live in. I live in Saltaire, which is like a World Heritage Centre. Which is where David Hockney has his gallery and everything.
Love David Hockney.
And it's a World Heritage place. Amazing.
Actually, Stephen, you are actually, whatever else you're trying to achieve here, you are acting as a very good advert for Bradford.
Bradford's a fabulous
I do want to
place.
come up.
Yeah, do come up, and I'll take you around the Hockney Gallery, and we'll have lunch, and you can go down to Manningham Park to the Cartwright Gallery, and things like that, and it's a fabulous place, Bradford.
And we can have a curry.
And you 5 minutes and you're out on the Bronte Moors, Haworth, Heathcliff, and all that.
Oh yes,
the Brontes. You're an hour and you're up in the middle of the Dales, and Skipton is a beautiful town, just on the outskirts of Bradford. It's a fabulous place.
And what's the ratio of Muslims to non-Muslims in Bradford?
I honestly don't know that. I truthfully don't know. I don't think.
Have a wild guess.
30%.
30% Muslim.
Probably.
Okay.
Something like that,
and of that 30% Muslim population, how many of them kind of want to kill us all, or support people who want to kill us all, and ultimately want jihad and Sharia law to be declared on the whole of the UK?
Well, I think the Sharia. I don't know about. Yeah, I think there's two angles here. I think a lot of Muslims want to live under Sharia law.
Right.
That's their chosen pathway.
Yeah.
Now, that's where I butt heads with them big time, because this is our country. We've got a justice system that's thousands of years old, and it's tried and tested. It's not perfect. It's a movable feast. It keeps changing and adapting to new things as we need them. And if you come to this country or you live in this country, that's the law in which you live. Yeah. And I think the bowing down, and I think we're about 80 or 90, have we now, across the country, Sharia courts. It's absolutely...
It's extraordinary.
It's extraordinary. Because where does it end? Do you get, how many Americans live in this country? Do they suddenly turn around and say, we want to live under the Constitution of America? Which, don't forget, the Second Amendment says they can bear arms. Where do we end?
I'd like that. I'm going to become an American.
Well, right. But where does it? Where does it end? It's a ridiculous pathway to have gone down. And but Theresa May has given her full backing to it.
Theresa May, not without reason has she got that name. She's an appalling woman.
Shocking, but she's given the full backing to Sharia courts and Sharia law. Yeah. And her statement was something like, many people in Britain, or many British people, thrive under Sharia law. I've never heard anything like it in all my life.
Yeah, not the women, I'd say. Not the ones that
exactly not. And Dame Helen Casey, read her report on Muslim women, and the lack of empowerment, the lack of integration, the lack of socialising, jobs, being able to speak the language. It's not good.
So we've already established that a significant proportion of the Muslim population in the north of England would very happily have Sharia law.
Yeah, I'm fairly happy to say that. That statement.
So, how many of them actually kind of want to integrate and just become a part of Britain, or do you think ultimately they'd all secretly like it if we became part of the caliphate?
I think they'd all like to. I think majority of Muslims living in the country would live under Sharia law if they were allowed to do so. Yeah,
and they really wouldn't mind if the crescent flag was flying over.
No, No, I don't think they would. And
So
then you've got to look at to the extreme. It's the extreme element of that then, how far they would go with under Sharia law with regards to punishment. For instance, beatings and stonings to death and things like that. Well, obviously, there's no way we could allow that, or do we? That's the problem. Look at Speaker's Corner, what's going on there at the moment.
Yes.
And there's only one way to say one thing about Speaker's Corner is being Islamified. Day in, day out, Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park. Go down there every day, and you will find that the Muslim population of wherever they're coming from are trying to take over that, and they're pushing the boundaries.
Yes.
It started with a few of them praying there, and now it's wholesale closing down free speech. People are being attacked there, etc. And that, I honestly believe that Hyde Park, Speaker's Corner, could be the spark plug for major disturbance.
Right, that's interesting. So, I'm trying to paint a rosy picture of it now.
Well,
already.
yeah, I mean, listen, I need to make it crystal clear. I was born and brought up in Bradford. I went to school. A lot of my friends at school were from Pakistan and from India, the Indian lads in particular. We played cricket and volleyball. We played rugby together.
Yeah, but Stephen,
then I policed them, and I was a policeman. I worked with Asian police officers, and I've been to weddings and all, the whole gamut of things. And the majority of Muslims are quite peaceful people.
You're in your 50s,
but there are, unfortunately, a lot of them now that have got this. Yeah, where that's come from? Is it the Wahhabi Islam that's promulgated by and paid for by Saudi Arabia in the mosques? There's a lot of evidence to suggest that.
Well, you've got Deobandism, which if these are Pakistani, it's not Wahhabism, it's Deobandism, which is the sort of Pakistani version thereof. Yeah. So you can't really even blame Saudi Arabia for this. This is a kind of.
But what do we do? What's the answer? Nobody's found the answer, have they? You've got to start taking the actual population, the communities themselves, to ask them to contribute to putting this right. But how that's going to happen, I don't know.
Well, I don't see how it can end happily if they go on wanting to be a parallel community that doesn't want to integrate and embrace our ways. But
don't also forget, though, James, it's not just the Muslim population. You've got in Sheffield right now. There's 6,300. Romanians have settled in one part of, I forgot the name of it, part of Sheffield.
6,300. When you say Romanians, do you mean Roma?
Roma.
Yeah.
Roma.
Which is slightly, yeah.
Yeah, well, okay, Roma, there's hell on with them.
Yeah.
They're absolutely kicking up a storm. People are really struggling. They can't live there. They're having to sell up their houses. Their houses have devalued. They're trying to move out. They're open. There was a thing on the other day with young Roma lads, and they were whipping women as they were walking down the street. They'd just been to the shop. And of course, there's no coppers because we've already talked about that.
This
next?
Is in Sheffield.
This is in Sheffield.
And how is that?
So I don't know. Well, they've just settled there. 6,300, I think it is, Roma, and they've just settled in this particular part of Sheffield. I don't know the name of it.
Is it the crazy mayor?
I don't know if he's got anything to do with it or not. He probably has had. But yeah, look at him. He refused to wear a red poppy on Remembrance Day. He wore a white poppy, one. Yes. And he was challenged about that. And so you get what you get what you get, don't you? That's how it goes. But that to me that's small fry. Him wearing a white poppy is just an idiot. But the bigger picture is what's going on, in different parts of the country. But nobody from the political elite in Westminster is looking at this in any way, shape, or form, and that's where the problems lie.
Yeah.
And if you dare to raise it, if you dare to mention it, you're a racist.
Yeah.
Or you're a xenophobe. And actually, we're not. We're just realists. And we're not far right, we're just right.
Yeah. That's almost a good way to end the podcast, unless there's anything else
No, that's been fine. No, it's good. Thank you. Yeah.
Well,
sorry it's been a bit sort of doomy and gloomy, but it's a factual based, this is how things are, and this is where, particularly with crime, law and order, and particularly with the proliferation of rape gangs, it's industrial scale. There's tens of thousands of girls have had their lives ruined as young. I think the youngest recorded is 10.
It's
no more. What are we doing in a society that allows that to happen?
Well, it's been great having you on the poddy, and particularly because it's always nice having a policeman handy where you can ask him all the questions you've always wanted to ask a policeman.
Yeah.
So thank you for
no problem. Not
fulfilling
that.
Thanks,
James.
Task. Thank you. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special ex-policeman guest, Stephen Place. Thank you and goodbye.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
I think that it's the epitome of hypocrisy. Unless you fall in line with their liberal agenda, this uniparty, globalist, liberal agenda, they will never support you. They use the whole gender issue, of course, as some kind of tool to prop up their messaging, but it's the phoniest thing.
Sirius XM Patriot, Channel 125.